January 17th, 1943, Schweinfurt, Bavaria. The winter sun hangs low over the German countryside, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted fields. In the distance, the hum of machinery echoes from the vast industrial complexes, factories that churn out the ball bearings essential to every German tank, aircraft, and artillery piece rolling off the assembly lines. The smoke rises in steady columns, a testament to the Third Reich's industrial might. The workers below move with mechanical precision, unaware that in the frozen skies above England, young men are preparing to challenge the very heart of Hitler's war machine. These men are about to embark on a mission so dangerous that survival itself would become a form of victory. They are the crews of the 8th Air Force, and they are about to fly into hell. By the winter of 1943, the Allied bombing campaign over Europe had entered a critical phase. The strategy was simple in theory, catastrophic in execution. Destroy Germany's industrial capacity, and you cripple its ability to wage war. But theory dissolves in the face of flak batteries, swarms of Luftwaffe fighters, and the unforgiving mathematics of attrition. The Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission, planned for August 17, 1943, would become the embodiment of this brutal calculus. The target? 2 cities whose factories produce nearly 2/3 of Germany's ball bearings. Without ball bearings, the Wehrmacht's tanks would grind to a halt, its aircraft would never leave the ground, and the entire German war effort would seize like an engine without oil. The plan called for 376 B-17 flying fortresses to penetrate deep into German territory without fighter escort for most of the journey. The P-47 Thunderbolts that accompanied them could only fly so far before their fuel tanks drained dry, leaving the bombers naked against the full fury of the Luftwaffe. The men who volunteered for this mission knew the odds. They had seen the empty bunks, the personal effects packed away, the letters sent home that would never receive replies. They understood that this was not a mission designed for survival, it was designed for impact. The crews who climbed into their aircraft that August morning expected camaraderie, courage, and perhaps a measure of glory. They had trained for months, learning to operate in formation, to manage oxygen at 30,000 feet, to aim through the Norden bomb site with precision that bordered on artistry. They believed in the nobility of their cause, in the righteousness of striking at tyranny's industrial spine. Some carried photographs of sweethearts, others clutched rosaries or lucky coins. They joked nervously, smoked their last cigarettes on solid ground, and tried not to think about the statistics they all knew, that the average life expectancy of a bomber crew member over Germany was measured in missions, not years. What they encountered was something beyond the scope of their training, beyond the reach of their imagination.
The Luftwaffe rose to meet them like a biblical plague. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s attacked in coordinated waves, their cannon fire tearing through aluminum fuselages as if they were paper. German pilots had learned to attack head-on, aiming for the cockpit where a single burst could decapitate an entire crew's leadership. The flak began at the German border, black clouds of explosive fragmentation that filled the sky with shrapnel, each burst capable of shredding metal and flesh with equal indifference. Inside the bombers, men watched as aircraft beside them simply disintegrated, falling from formation in spirals of smoke and flame. Parachutes blossomed like white flowers against the dark canvas of war, each one representing a man falling into uncertain captivity or death. The cold was merciless. At altitude, temperatures plunged to 50 degrees below zero. Guns froze, hydraulic systems failed. Men's fingers stuck to metal surfaces, their breath crystallizing in the thin air. Wounded gunners bled out slowly, their blood freezing before it could pool. The oxygen masks that kept them conscious also isolated them, each man trapped in his own private struggle against suffocation, fear, and the certainty of mathematics turning against them. The historical record speaks in stark numbers. Of the 376 bombers that departed England, 60 were shot down over Germany. Another 17 were so badly damaged they crashed on return or were written off as total losses. That represents a loss rate of approximately 20% in a single mission, a catastrophic figure that, if sustained, would annihilate the entire 8th Air Force within 5 missions. But the human cost extended beyond the aircraft. Each B-17 carried 10 men. The math is brutal. 600 men wounded or missing in a single afternoon. In the debriefing rooms that evening, the silence was heavier than the flak they had flown through. Among the survivors, Technical Sergeant John J. McNamara of the 381st Bomb Group recorded in his diary, "We flew through curtains of fire. I counted 11 planes going down before I stopped counting. The sky was full of parachutes and burning metal. I thought about my mother's last letter, about the cherry tree in our yard, about anything except the fact that we had 3 more hours to fly like this." Another account from Lieutenant Robert Rosenthal, whose aircraft Rosie's Riveters was one of the few to return undamaged, noted the transformation in his crew. "We went in as boys playing at war. We came back as old men who understood that survival was not a right, but a lottery, and we had simply drawn lucky numbers that day." What changed these men was not the violence itself, but its scale and its inevitability. They had expected combat. They had signed up for it, trained for it, even romanticized it in the abstract way young men do when death remains theoretical. What they had not expected was the industrial efficiency of mass aerial warfare, where human courage became statistically irrelevant against concentrated firepower. The mission shattered their illusions about the nature of modern combat.
There was no glory at 30,000 feet, only mathematics and metal, and the terrible randomness of who lived and who burned. For the German defenders, the mission represented a different kind of awakening. They had assumed their industrial heartland was beyond the reach of Allied bombers, protected by distance and the Luftwaffe's superiority. The raid proved them catastrophically wrong. Despite the horrific losses inflicted on the Americans, the bombs found their targets. Production at the Schweinfurt factories dropped by 38% in the following weeks. The myth of invulnerability died in the smoke rising from Bavaria's industrial districts. Among the wreckage and the bloodshed, one object appeared repeatedly in survivor accounts: the chocolate bar. Standard issue in American rations, it seems almost absurdly trivial against the backdrop of such violence. Yet, in debriefing after debriefing, men mentioned it, how they clutched it during the mission, how its weight in their pocket represented home, normalcy, a world where sweetness still existed. Some used them to bribe their way through occupied territory after being shot down. Others saved them for months, unable to eat something that had accompanied them through hell. The chocolate became a symbol of American abundance confronting German scarcity. While the Luftwaffe pilots fought valiantly, they did so on reduced rations, with fuel growing scarce and replacement aircraft increasingly difficult to produce. The Americans could afford to lose 60 bombers in a single day and return with 300 more the following week. They could equip each airman with luxuries, chocolate, cigarettes, wool-lined flight suits that German industry could barely provide to its frontline troops. The mission's brutality obscured this underlying truth. The side with the capacity to absorb such losses and continue the offensive held an advantage no amount of tactical brilliance could overcome. The aftermath of Schweinfurt-Regensburg forced a reckoning within the American command structure. The losses were unsustainable. Something had to change, or the daylight bombing campaign would collapse under the weight of its own casualties. The solution came in the form of the P-51 Mustang, a long-range fighter capable of escorting bombers all the way to their targets and back. With the Mustang's arrival in significant numbers by early 1944, the balance shifted. The Luftwaffe, forced to fight against both bombers and their escorts, began to lose its pilots faster than it could replace them. The sacrifice at Schweinfurt purchased time,
brutal, blood-soaked time for technology and strategy to evolve. But the men who flew that mission carried it with them forever. In post-war interviews, veterans spoke of nightmares that never faded, of phantom flak bursts glimpsed in thunderclouds, of the sound of tearing metal that echoed through their memories decades later. They had flown into the statistical abyss and emerged, against all probability, alive. That survival came with a price, the knowledge that their luck was purchased with the deaths of 600 brothers who drew different numbers in fortune's lottery. There is a photograph taken after the mission, preserved in the National Archives. It shows a group of airmen standing beside their damaged B-17, holes punched through its wings and fuselage like stigmata. They are not smiling. Their faces carry the hollow-eyed exhaustion of men who have witnessed the machinery of industrial death up close.
One holds a crumpled chocolate bar wrapper. Another stares at something beyond the camera's frame, perhaps seeing the parachutes still falling in his mind's eye. This image captures the essence of what the Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission represented, the collision between human courage and industrial warfare's pitiless efficiency. These men did not fail. They accomplished their objective, striking a blow against Nazi production capacity. But victory in that moment was measured not in glory, but in survival rates that would make any modern military commander recoil in horror. They were asked to accept a 97% casualty rate projection over the course of a standard 25-mission tour, and they climbed into their aircraft anyway. August 17, 1943, ended not with triumph, but with exhaustion. The debriefing rooms fell silent as crews recounted what they had witnessed. Chaplains moved among the men, offering what comfort religion or simple human presence could provide. Intelligence officers tallied the losses with mechanical precision, their faces betraying nothing of the horror their numbers represented. Outside, maintenance crews worked through the night, patching holes, replacing engines, preparing the surviving aircraft for the next mission. In the end, the Schweinfurt-Regensburg raid became a watershed moment in the air war over Europe, a demonstration that strategic bombing could reach Germany's industrial core, but only at a cost measured in shattered aircraft and broken men. The mission proved that courage alone was insufficient against concentrated defenses, that technology and tactics had to evolve, or the bombers would be slaughtered wholesale. Most importantly, it revealed that in modern warfare, the side with the capacity to absorb catastrophic losses and continue fighting held an advantage as decisive as any weapon. The chocolate bars those men carried became artifacts of a larger truth, that American industrial might, symbolized by such small luxuries, would ultimately overwhelm an enemy fighting on diminishing resources. But that victory would be purchased with blood, measured in missions where coming home alive constituted success, where a 97% loss rate was not a deterrent, but a challenge accepted. The men who flew through those burning skies understood something fundamental about freedom's cost, that it must be paid in full, in advance, with no guarantee of return. They paid it at 30,000 feet, in frozen cockpits and flak-torn fuselages, knowing the odds and flying anyway. That is the legacy of Schweinfurt, not glory, but the terrible arithmetic of sacrifice, and the unwavering determination to continue the mission even when the mathematics of death seem insurmountable.